I'm fine, Dean. I hope you're in good and fine fettle, young man.
I'm not too bad, thanks. Just want to say thank you for joining us. So you're with Nutrabaits, Shimano, PV Products and Carp Green.
Yeah, I know it sounds daft, and people will be falling off the chairs when I say this, but it's quite a new phenomenon to be with, or in this team and in that team. These people are my sponsors, and I work closely with them, and I've done for a number of years, other than the Carp Green, which is a new thing. But I always try and make sure that it's not something that is said immediately after Mark Holmes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's because at the end of the day, without having people throwing up already, the most important part of that analogy is Mark Holmes or whatever your name is. You know what I mean? I try and say to people, don't think that because you're with a particular group of people or company that are assisting you in your fishing, that you have to stop being yourself. One of the hardest things I keep getting told by people is how they get an entrance into today's congested commercial carp world. And all I ever tell them, Dean, is just be yourself. Just go catch some fish and just be yourself. And eventually, if those two things are successful, and being yourself is repetitive as well, because if you start doing a little bit of media and all that, and you'll know better than anybody now you're doing the friendly carpers things, Dean, is that if you're not careful, you can start to think a little bit differently to a time before you did it, when really the best media, I think, is when people are themselves, Dean.
Yeah. True, very true.
And I see, the flip side of that is I see guys who've caught a lot of good fishing and are good anglers, and someone will switch a camera on or they'll do a live situation like this, and they turn into a gibbering wreck.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody in media work. I like to think carp fishing's for everybody, but certainly the media side of it is not for everybody, Dean.
No. Yeah. So I've got quite a few questions for you from the group.
Yeah.
You were the popular one.
Yeah.
Ian Russell commented and says you're a great guy, so thumbs up from him.
Well, I've got to tell you this now.
Yeah.
He is when people say to me, who's the most impressive carp angler that you know?
Yeah.
Or you've met, Ian Russell is probably one of three people. I won't name the other two, but Ian Russell is up there. Because not only is Ian Russell a nice guy, Ian Russell is the type of carp angler that is good at every aspect of carp fishing. He's not like me, where he's one facet where he just sits, bores them out and catches big fish. Yeah. Ian can do that, but he can also turn up at Drayton and catch 60 fish on zigs. He can go into a match and win a carp match. He can go to a brand new water and winkle them out. He really is not just a good all-rounder, but he is, I think he's one of the best. Like I said, he's in all my many, many years in carp fishing, Ian Russell is one of the best carp anglers you'll ever come across.
Yeah. Right, so I've got plenty of questions for you, so start cracking on with them. First one I'm going to ask is moon phases. Some people swear by them. Some people think it's nothing to do with the catch rates or anything. What do you think?
Well, I think, to be fair, all it does is it shows and highlights the improbables in carp fishing. And I think the improbables are the thing that are so hard to understand. And all I would say is improbables are what governs a person's ability to catch fish. Somebody might be talking complete utter nonsense in your opinion, and then you'll see him consistently catching big fish. And so you'll think to yourself, how did they do that? And I honestly believe it is an innate ability within them to think that they've got it right. And I think the moon phases are the same. Some people absolutely believe that big commons come out on a full moon.
Yeah.
And whereas other people will think, load of shit. Now, let me try and put some meat on the bones there and where I stand on it. I believe undoubtedly that there are massive changes in the climate. As you know, you've seen some of my slideshows where I've gone into depth about water temperatures.
Yeah.
And I've learned via that, and latterly I've been doing it with atmospheric air pressure as well, I've learned via those things that they're changing. So if we go back in a time machine and I were taking water temperatures 30 years ago, then they bear no resemblance to the average water temperatures that I'm taking in the last 2 or 3 years. So what does that mean? It means that Mr. Carp and a lot of these big ones have been around for more than 30 years. It means that there are certain constants within nature and there are certain changeable things within nature. And undoubtedly, the constants are the moon phases and are the daylight hours. The changing seasons are all over the place. We're currently now going into October. We've crossed the equinox, and I'm still getting temperatures this week of more than when carp spawn. Carp spawn 18 degrees or more, and the temperatures were 19 this week. We did have that deluge of rain, and they did fall down to 17 and a half as I was leaving. I usually fish 3 nights a week. But you can see there the fluctuation. Now then, what doesn't fluctuate is the daylight hours and the darkness and the cycle of the moon around the earth. And that, to me, is where moon phases fall in. Yeah. So moon phases are something naturally that you can depend on. And without a shadow of a doubt, that I believe there are certain magnetic forces and gravitational pull in moon phases that change the aquaculture intermittently. So full moon will affect a lake for maybe 12 to 24 hours. Now that's me and my analogy of it. Now my nitty gritty is very much like water temperature. No one has ever turned up at a lake and gone, oh, it's a waxing moon or it's half a moon. I'm not going to bother fishing. Just as I, in the past, would turn up at a lake and the water temperature was rubbish, I never not got the rods out. So one thing about collating a lot of information is if you're not careful, you just collating information, you actually are still going to go fishing. And the moon phases is the same. So what I would say is there something in it? I don't know. 2, do I think there's something in it? Yes, I do, but I don't know what it is. But one thing I would say to you, being 300 years old, I have caught big carp when there has been a full moon. I've caught big carp when there's been half a moon. And I've caught big carp when it's been a waxing or waning or whatever it's called moon. So to answer your question, I can't really give an informative answer. But what I would say is that it's a natural that the fish can depend upon.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So what would be your tips for new anglers coming into the sport or advice you would give them?
Oh, Jove, I mean, how long have you got? That's a very generic type of question, which has got a lot of answers. Yeah. I think, to be fair, and funnily enough, a friend of mine, a bloke called Stuart Walker, he's in his 70s now, he's Stuart, and he was always historically a matchman, and he had a time when he didn't fish often. And in that time, the advent of commercials with a lot of carping have come around. So they were asking me only this week, what rod should he buy? Because he's just starting at carp fishing. And he said to me 30 years ago, he'd never pick up a carp rod. So it's a very general question. What I would do is I would ask the person who was asking me that question, what type of carp fishing do you want? Now, if they want to be going straight into catching big ones, I'd say be careful what you wish for, because you're never going to learn anything, Dean, sat behind motionless indicators. And I think it was Julian that said it and written about it lots of times, that in order to become proficient at carp fishing and in order to learn, you have to catch. And I get, how can I put it? I try not to constantly go on about catching, because if you're not careful, if you have been lucky and caught a few over the years, and you start talking about catching fish and catching big fish, you can come across as a little bit big-headed, and I've always tried to dull that down. But to ask what my advice to a beginner would be is, number 1, go to a water where you know you're going to get action. Number 2, ask people who are around you in a nice, friendly manner when you see them catching what they're doing, and is there any way they could give you some advice. One thing I've found, and your group is testament to that, Dean, is that invariably, most people, when you go to them and say, "Can you help me, please, buddy?" There's very few who'll say, do one. Most people I know, even the most crotchiest old bastards going like me, when someone comes to them and says, "Can you help me?" you won't turn them away. And I think that carp fishing, irrespective of us getting a bad press from certain sections, on a lot of waters, it's a brotherhood. And I think if you were on a bit of a runs water and the sort of Draytons of this world, and you were struggling, I think if you go to anybody that's catching near you and say, "Have you got any tips out you can do?" they would point you in the right direction. So number one, I would think, go to a water that's heavily stocked. Number two, go to a water that's got a track record of getting lots of bites. Number three, catch as many fish as you can. And number four, be a nice guy, stay humble and polite, and ask questions. And you will be amazed at how you will find someone with a lot of experience and someone with a philanthropic outlook who will say, "You know what, mate, come over here, I'll show you how to go on." Most people like to be nice. And if you actually play to that, you'll find that they will help you.
Yep. Oh, I totally agree with that. Right, so if you could put all the elements together for the perfect fishing situation, what would they be?
Well, the one that I always used to say, and seems to get lost a little bit in these days of high stocks and lots of big carp around, is the weather. That's the one imponderable that you just can't. It is the difference often between catching well and not catching.
Yeah.
Now, I'll give you an example. I recently did some filming with Capital TV, and we were fishing this Yorkshire gravel pit that was fishing abysmal. And the air pressure the week before the filming was 985. So I thought, oh, well, I'll go there, get a little bit of practice in, and ready for the cameras the following week. Well, I went and I did 3 nights and never had a bite. And it's the first time I've been to that pit this year and never had a bite. So I'm thinking, oh my God, this ain't gonna work, because the air pressure the following week when I was doing the filming was 1,028. Yeah. Well, would you believe I managed to nab one for the camera just short of 37, which is a big fish for Yorkshire, live on the on the TV cameras, and that kind of throws in the face the fact that the weather is a massive factor. What I'm saying by that is you can always catch one fish in bad weather conditions. If you have really good weather conditions and you get it right, then you can catch more fish. So what you would need for the perfect situation is, A, I would need the weather to be in my favour. 2, I would like, if possible, to have been able to establish a food bait on there, not an attraction bait, a food bait on there. And number 3, be able to get my lines down and not be in a situation where other carp anglers' activities affect my particular fishing spots. And that's very, very difficult, because I'll give you an example. This particular pit that I'm on about, when I fish it on my own, I don't like it, because I like other bankside activity to move the fish around. People's ultimate hope when they go fishing is that they're the only ones there. Oh, brilliant, I've got the lake to myself. Well, be careful what you wish for, because a lot of the time when you've got the lake to yourself, the fish can move to the other side of the lake, lie up in peace and security, and you'll never get a bite. However, you have 4 or 5 people on your lake, 2 at one end, 2 at the other end, 2 in the middle, and 2 in the other side, so 8 people. Well, then the fish don't have to go very far until they're encountering danger, till they're encountering lines in the water. And what happens in those situations? 2 things happen, Dean. If it's a very, very large water, the fish will move out of range of anglers. So I'll give you an example, say somewhere like Grenville. Grenville is a 75-acre massive lake, and even the best casters on there can do no more than about 205, 210 yards, which, when I say no more, that is amazing to me. I can't walk that far, Dean. So for them to actually cast that length is just absolutely incredible. But if can't want to get out of the way, they can go 400 yards away from the bank and they're never going to get disturbed. Now, equally, this particular Yorkshire gravel pit that I was telling you about, you can reach it from anywhere in the middle. 24 wraps, and from anywhere on the bank, you're in the middle of the lake. So what happens when you get a lot of people on there is the fish go to the edges. So if they go to the edges, the guy who's underhand flicking 4 wraps, the guy who's casting short 8 wraps, putting a baiting situation in where he can control it, all those situations will stand him in good stead. So I want decent weather. I want an established bait. I want a water that's got a few people on there. And I want the ability to be able to do my own fishing within those situations, but to be relatively unhindered by other anglers' activities. That's ultimately what I would be looking for, Dean.
Yep. No, right, so you come to a lake for the first time. What would your tactics be approaching that lake? We've never fished it before.
Well, again, it depends what type of lake it is. I don't think most people I think it's naive to imagine the days of you with a rod in your hand and you going through the wood and suddenly you come across this enchanted lake that you know nothing about. I mean, to the detriment of carp fishing, my personal opinion but to the detriment of carp fishing, you have these companies now where they take a booking of a swim for you. And not only am I led to believe that they tell you what peg you're in and what dates you're going to be fishing in that peg, but they also give you information as to the spots to cast at. I couldn't think of anything worse to me. I'll give you a little situation, a little real life scenario. I got a ticket to fish a water many, many years ago that was probably one of the most sought after tickets in the country. It was the fabled caravan park at Maxi that had this, the caravan park linear in this fantastic fish. And one of my good friends had fished it and been successful on there. And I didn't fish it the first year. And the second year I started to make plans to fish it. Where are you going to go? He said to me, where are you fishing, Holmes? So I said, I'm going to have a crack at, the name of this place was Savannah. I'm going to have a crack at Savannah. All right, you want to be fishing in secret at 20 wraps towards the big willow tree. And I said to him, shut up. Will you just shut up? I said, I don't want you to tell me where you've caught them from. Oh, all right, then I won't say anything. Anyway, you've guessed what I'm going to say. I goes to the lake first time, gets on it. I'd walk around the place, but it was the first time I'd gone with my fishing rods to fish. Goes to the place, gets in this secret swim, gets me marker float out, does my groundwork and all the rest of it. Oh, put one in. Anyway, let's fast forward. 36 hours in, a day and a half, and I've caught no. Well, you know what I'm going to say. I reeled one rod in, put 20 wraps on, cast it towards the willow tree, an hour later off it rattled. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's one thing to go to a lake blind, but these days, the majority of people are not going to a lake blind. Not only is the social media where people will get information from anglers that have fished it, but there's also, like I said, these swim bookers and various things. I don't want to know anything about that because for me, part of the enjoyment and matrix of Mark Holmes' fishing is working it out for himself. However, and it's a huge however, a young bloke with 2 kids works in a warehouse and his missus lets him go once every 3 weeks. He's not got time to be pissballing about trying to discover things for himself. If someone can give him information quickly that allows him to get bites quickly, then that's fantastic. So to answer the question in a succinct way, I would be looking for reasonable average size fish, 1 or 2 target fish that I would like. I would be looking for something that was that had weed in it, which might surprise people, and I would be looking for something that was castable too. There is the problem. There are some waters that are superb waters, but you can't cast to the areas, and we have all gizmos and paraphernalia and all that, and I won't go on the Moan Fest just yet, but we have all the stuff there that make take it away from what I class as fishing. To me, fishing is turning up, getting a fishing rod, casting out a lead, understanding the topography, understanding the levels of what's going on and the water level, and making your plans accordingly.
Okay. So, if you could only use one liquid in your fishing, what are you going for?
One liquid in my fishing?
Yeah.
Oh, Christ. I think it would probably be a toss-up between two. I'm afraid I can't narrow it down to one.
Okay.
But it would be a liquid that would be a hybrid of two. It would be molasses and it would be golden syrup. And I would mix both of those liquids together. And the reason why I use syrups so much is because they allow the liquid to go down to the bottom of the lake very, very quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, yours truly coined the phrase that it leaks from the bottom to the top.
Yeah.
I did that years and years ago at a show for DNA where their hydro week, which I was very lucky. I was on that early with Steve Carey, and we ended up calling it hydro week, but I used to call it liquid gold.
Yeah.
And I had some incredible catches on that. And basically all that was just all that is using syrups. And now I see a lot of the liquids that people and bait companies are using have a thick viscosity. And so that's where the golden syrup comes in. The molasses is a natural, sugar content. And of course the sugar turns to ethanol when it's got heat involved. So it fermentates. And also, of course, it is a natural astringent. It helps with gut problems and all sorts of things. So it would be a mixture of those two, Dean.
Yeah, nice one. Do you have any little lucky charms that you take fishing with you, or any rituals you like to do? Give yourself a bit of
No, I think it's a load of old bollocks.
Yeah.
Absolute. But I see these older fellas and younger lads with Bart Simpson on his buzzer bars or E-Man or whatever it is, and I just not for me. I'm incredibly boring, Dean. I don't, if you went fishing with me, you would be massively underwhelmed. I don't have any. I have there's a difference between a routine compared to any what I would call little knickknacks that you take and any superstitions that you have. I don't have any superstitions because I've found that when I may have been superstitious, I've caught when I've not been superstitious, and I can't say that there's anything that I do. What I tend to do is I have a way that I fish, and that's a different emphasis of routine, and that is because I now know that I have the luxury of more time on the bank. I can do a lot of preparatory work on the bank. Whereas when I was younger and bringing up a young family and didn't have much time, the preparatory work was often done outside of actually fishing for them. So pre-baiting, which is one of the most fabled ways of preparatory work, pre-baiting was always done before I actually cast a rod out. Nowadays, because I've got time, I will try and establish a better bait, an area of where I want the fish to feed and graze on the first sort of 3 or 4 hours of my fishing, knowing that I've got 48 hours or more, 72 hours to wait for them to come on to that work.
Yeah. So, what would you say is the best winter carp bait and brackets aside from maggots?
Well, I don't think maggots are the best winter carp bait because I just think that they don't do the fish much good. And what it is that if you have everybody fishing maggots, then they're going to catch carp.
Yeah.
But every water that I've been on, where I've been up against a few guys with I've gone on with my boilie approach, and I've been up against guys with maggots. I've outfished them enormously.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. If suddenly I turned up to somewhere like Linear or Farlows, where a lot of maggots are going to go in, stands to reason. If something gets used more, it's going to have more. It's going to catch more. But my winter bait, bar none, has to be something that's rich in oleoresins, and everybody will be sick about me banging on about oleoresins. oleoresins, oleoresins. And basically what they are is they are what are inherently in spice and spice baits, which is why historically spicy baits were always good in the winter because they're rich in oleoresins. And what oleoresins do is they agitate the olfactory system of carp, and that's underneath their gill covers. And so it's the difference between their gustatory system, which is when they eat something, and then they taste it and evaluate whether it's any good or not. Well, the olfactory system is just simply the sense of smell. So you are attracting fish, but you're not feeding them.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the key. As the water temperatures start to reduce, without a shadow of a doubt, they don't need as much food, but they will feed. Yeah. And what I'm looking, therefore, is I'm looking for someone to stimulate them into feeding. So I'm not just looking for them to feed, I'm looking for that stimulation to feed. And that is done more with oleoresins and spices that are rich in oleoresins in no particular order are things like fenugreek, are things like paprika, are things like chili, are things like garlic, are things like turmeric. All these sort of spices are rich in them. Now, don't get me wrong, the clever fella is able to ascertain which ones work the best at what temperatures and also what mix. You can mix, and I've done it for years, you can mix various spices to come up with your own bespoke spice. And that is something that stood me in good stead. And that's why currently I use the trigger ice, because when I evaluated the Nutrabaits 4 boilies, the one that had the biggest oleoresin content were trigger ice. And obviously, people assume because of the name that it is primarily something that works really well in cold water conditions. Let me tell you, as I hope my own results show, it works all year round for me. But to answer the question, going into winter, look for something that's going to stimulate the olfactory system of carp.
Yeah, brilliant. Right. So, one question I've been asked is best way to approach fishing for a big carp in a small lake. Any advice on that?
Yeah. Well, I suppose if I have any skill, that's been the skill. A lot of the carp that I've caught over the years, Dean, I've been on smaller waters, and that's not by design. What a lot of people don't understand is that a lot of northern anglers, the waters that were at our disposal that had carp in them were primarily ponds and lodges and small type of lakes. These massive gravel pits that you get further down south, they just weren't there in the north. And certainly the ones that were there were deeper type waters, so they didn't have coarse fishing.
Yeah.
You know, places like Malham Tarn and Semawater and these big type of lakes, they had maybe an odd fish that had been sneaked in but no one knew about, but they were predominantly silverfish and they were predominantly game fish. So they were a no-no. So my sort of early days, and it led on to my sort of normal days, was sort of chasing big fish in small waters. Now, the one thing I would say to answer that question is the first thing you've got to remember is what's good about that is bad about that. What's good about that is that you're never far away from your target fish.
Yeah.
If you're fishing a 2-acre, 3-acre lake, then there's a very good chance that at some point during your 2 nights fishing or 3 nights fishing or whatever, that your target fish is going to be near you at some point, particularly if it's summertime where they're moving. What I would suggest doing, and it's as old as the hills, there's no secrets, is you can't beat history. So if you talk to people who fished the lake in the past, who may have been fortunate to catch the target fish, and talk about when and where, these things are creatures by habit. You can change those habits, as I've done and proven in the past with various things you can do. But left to their own devices, carp very much are only interested in 3 things: sex, security, and food. And once the water temperature falls less than 18 degrees, you can take sex out of the scenario. And then what you're then looking at is you're looking at security and food. And normally the big fish makes a trade-off. And I always say this to people, it's not necessarily that the most or the hardest fish to catch in a lake is the big one you want. Because he's made the leap, he's made the analogy that in order for him to flourish, in order for him to put weight on, in order for him, I keep saying him, it could be an earth, but in order for them to grow, they need to eat food. Well, it stands to reason, the more a fish eats, the more chance it has of being caught. So some waters I know, the big fish, and I've done it so many times, and I don't want to sound arrogant. Sometimes I've gone to waters, and the biggest fish in the lake I've caught in the first day of fishing for them. So what I would suggest is that you get to know people who fished it if you can, get to find out as much knowledge as you can, and go and spend as much time on the water. You need to be accurate. Accuracy is the number one key to small water fishing. You can put a bait here. I'll put my finger. You can put a bait there and not get a bite. You can put a bait there and get a bite. They really are, with the small, intimate waters, they are masters of their own universe. Where on very large waters, if you get the fish in the area, generally you can catch them. That's not the case in small waters. What I would do is I would look to try and understand what type of weed is in the lake. Is it bistot? Is it milfoil? Is it Canadian pondweed? Is it silkweed? I would look at what the bottom invariably is like. Is it silty bottom? Is it a hard bottom? Is it a clay bottom? Is it like most of the lakes in this country? Has it got varied parts of all of those things? I would look at what the indigenous non-carp stock is. Is the tension there? Is the bream in there? Is it all of these sort of things I would look at to build up the knowledge of how to catch the big fish. And then what I would do is if your geography allowed it and the rules of the lake allowed it, I would concentrate on one area only, and I would look at bringing the fish to me.
Yeah.
There are some great anglers about who stalk fish, but invariably I've found that stalking becomes a very antisocial angling problem these days. If I'm fishing and some spotty youth is climbing a tree in the next swim to me, I get the arse.
Yeah.
If some guy packs up 6 or 7 times in a day and he's moving round me because he's seen a fish fart, I get the arse. So my way of catching them is not to go hunting them, it's to go trapping them. Yeah. And so the analogy, instead of me going looking for the fish to catch him, I set my stall up and I wait for the fish to come. And there are certain things that you can do to catch the big fish. The most important thing you need with a big fish is to make sure that you feed him.
Yeah.
Because a feeding carp is easy to catch.
Yeah.
Make no mistake about it. An investigation pickup, which is every single time a carp sucks anything into its mouth, that's an investigation pickup, then that can be difficult. When it comes to this nonsense at the moment of this underwater photography that we're seeing, where people are making analogies based on what they're seeing underwater, it would do my nutting. Because a lot of the time what people are seeing are investigation pickups. The carp doesn't have fingers, so it literally sucks it in to see what it is. However, if you have an established food bait and that fish, along with the rest of the lake, has got its head down and feeding, then you're in with a great chance of catching it. Now, the only problem you've got, the last thing I would say, is your luck stops when the indicator goes. So you then need to make sure that you've got sufficient, and here's a blast from the past word, stout, S-T-O-U-T. Make sure you've got stout tackle. What that basically means is make sure that you've got a line that can handle the fish if it goes into weed, a rod that can steer him round, and hooks that are strong and sharp enough to stop in its mouth. Cover all those bases, and I'm sure that eventually the big one will come along. And it's always stood me in good stead, Dean.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so going into baits a bit now. Been asked from citric acid in baits, what ingredients are the detractors?
Oh dear, that is how long have you got? The reason why I spoke at length about citric acid is because, and I'm going to have to get a bit technical here, so excuse me to the people that will fall asleep for the next 5 minutes. But most lakes, in actual fact, the majority of the lakes, probably 99% of the lakes in this country, have a pH of between 6.9, 7, and 7.1. And of course, 6.9 means it's slightly acidic, 7 means it's neutral, and 7.1 means it's alkaline. And what I've found through my studies, and this comes a lot from the koi industry, is that carp investigate any change within the water column. So if you've got my fingers at the bottom of the lake and the top of the screen is the top of the lake, if the bait's on the bottom here, the leakage up to the surface is like a column. It tends to go up rather than dissipate. And what happens is that carp home in on the pH shift in that water column. And that's why a carp can find a bloodworm bed that's as big as your dining room table in 40 acres of water, because the excretion of the bloodworm causes a key shift in the water column, and that's how fish home in it. So I would think the most important thing is the certain things you can do is to look at changing the pH in the water. And if you can introduce something into your bait around your upbait, and to a lesser extent your freebies, that has a plus or minus of 2, then you will get fish to come in it. Now then, a -2, which would make the bait acidic, you are only ever going to get investigation pickups. No living animal, and I include ourselves in this, no living animal flourishes who eats anything that is predominantly acidic. Most acidic type foods can lead to growths and cancer growths. The quickest way to cure cancer in any animal, including a human being, is to change your diet to all alkaline. I dare to suggest that people that are suffering with cancer, if they look at their diet and change it to all alkaline, in some respects you can reverse cancer. And I don't want to be controversial saying that, but alkaline is a lot more better for you. However, an acidic change, they seem to warm onto quickly, which is why fruit flavours were used tremendously on single up baits. So you'd have pineapple, you'd have orange, you'd have grapefruit, you'd have lemon, you'd have all these sort of things, cherry. Well, anything that was rich in citric acid seemed to attract fish. Well, that was because it changed the water column very quickly. And without getting too far, if you then throw in the mix, people used to use a glycerine type of glug. If you have, and glycerine has traces of alcohol. Well, if you put alcohol and acid together, you create a thing called an ester, and it's catalytic. And what that ester does is it changes the pH in the water faster than anything else. So you don't need to be Einstein, that you can use that to your advantage. The big problem with that is, as I rambled on about earlier, all you're ever doing there is you're creating an investigation pickup.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I used to fish when I was a small boy a reservoir in Yorkshire called Gelladine. And if you caught 4 fish from this place in a season, you were doing well. And I used to make my own baits at the time. And one of the things that we used to use was a very high content intense sweetener. And the actual recommended dosage, it was before kilos took on. We used to make pound mixes. It was 1 mil to 1 pound mix of boiling. And anyway, cut a long story short, me being the complete dick that I am, I thought, oh, bollocks to this. I'll put in 30 milligrams. So I put in 30 milligrams, ladled it in instead of 1 milligram. Took it along to the reservoir. Over the course of the weekend, I caught 6 fish.
Yeah.
I was like, hee, I've done it. I've cracked it. I've unlocked the code here. I've got it. This is going to stand me in good stead. Never had another bite the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And when I mean never had another bite, I mean never. Never had another bite. Now, what that led me to believe as I got a bit older and a little bit more studious is that those fish were pulled in by the intense sweetener and sucked that bait in to see what was going on.
Yeah.
The fact that as soon as they sucked it, they wanted to go and spit it straight out. Well, there was an hook behind it. So I got a bite.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that there are certain things you can do with bait which can get you quick bites, but don't get you constant bites. And one of the things which I always tell people shows this, and before all my trolls start jumping up and down, I'm going to beat them to the punch. I don't give a tuppeny toss about catching the same fish twice, because the one thing I realise is that if I catch a fish more than once, then it proves that the tactics, and particularly the bait, are working.
Yeah.
If you catch, anybody can catch a big fish once. Anybody. But to draw conclusions from one capture is very, very difficult. Yeah, if you catch something a lot, then it proves it worked. And I don't get, like I said, I don't get beat up about recaptures because our bream, tench, barbel, pike anglers, any coarse fish gets caught continuously. Bob Roberts said something to me recently, Angling Direct's Open Day in Newark. He said, you know, Mark, he said the Trent was founded on 4 fish that were 15-pounders. And it was the same 4 15-pounders that kept getting caught. Of course, things have moved on now, but it's built its reputation up on that. And of course, we think, because they're not so identifiable, that, oh, I've managed to catch this lovely roach I haven't been caught before. When in actual fact, it's getting caught every bloody week. Yeah. It's the same as the carp. So to answer your question, you've got to look at bait, and you've got to understand that there are certain things you can do to all bait, no matter who you buy it from, that can make it bespoke to you. But you need to understand that you have to try and make it so that it's something that is nutritious and something that they want to eat, rather than just something that they want to inspect.
Yeah. So, going back to your catches, what was your most memorable catch?
Nice. Right, it's a very difficult question. Probably one that doesn't get talked about much, and it's not the biggest fish I ever caught, but in 2006, which is a long time ago now, 18 years ago, I was the first man to catch 3 fish over 50 pounds in one season. I caught a 52-pounder in June. I caught a 61-pounder in June, and I caught a 50-pound common in September. And like I said, that was 18 years ago. So you start to put that, and that 61 is still the surface record. But the point I'm getting at is it's the most memorable fish. It's quite a while ago, and it was that 50-pound common. I managed to get permission's the wrong word. I never really got permission. I bribed the security man on a ski lake in Northamptonshire, and it was a big lake. It was about 92 acres. Yeah. And I managed to get on there, and I came across on the top end near the shallows. 1 or 2 people know where this lake is, but I shall, to not incriminate people, I won't name the lake. But on the shallows of this lake, I saw, I think, the entire lake's population, which was 30 carp. I counted 30 carp, and I managed to catch, from memory, 26 or 27 of them. And are you ready for this? And this is 2006. Smallest one was 37 pounds. Yeah. I managed to, the biggest one I caught was a male common, which was 50 pound 6. One morning, are you ready for this? I caught a 41, a 43 and a 44. One morning. Yeah. And the reason why the £50 common is probably the most memorable catch to me personally. Was I'd seen this fish a few times. I couldn't catch it, and it was a male. And I actually watched it eating fry along with another male of about £40. And I caught it on a whitebait. I caught it on a chub float, little glass chub float, like force one shot. I fished 2.5 foot deep, and I mounted this whitebait on a paper clip. Opened the paper clip up, put it through its body, and put it on this hook, and I cast it out, and it took it straight away. As soon as it hit the surface, and the whitebait started falling down, this fish took it straight away, and that was £50 6 ounce in 2006.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Right. Betaine in lysine in hook baits. Someone said.
Yeah, I mean, I've done this to death on the betaine. Right, let's explain betaine. Betaine predominantly comes from sugar beet. And what they do is with betaine, it's fed to animals, particular hooved animals, to stop their gut twisting. Those of a equestrian bent will understand what colic is. And colic is when an animal eats too much grass and it twists its bowel inside. And basically it can't untwist it. And colic will kill horses. And so what happens is they give it betaine, a form of betaine, which is like a muscle relaxer. So it goes into the animal, it relaxes them, and it undoes the bowel twisting. So that's historically where betaine comes from. Now, betaine from fishing is very, very good. And I'll tell you why it's very, very good. It's good because the two areas you must always look for when you're looking for an edging bait, and I've said this so many times, and people act on it or not act on it as is their want. And one is laxatives, and one is anorexics. If you look at those two areas in the human food chain, there are a plethora of ingredients in there that you can use. And so betaine is a form of laxative. It actually gets through the system very, very quick. So I'll tell you another laxative to go with it, bicarbonate of soda. If you use bicarbonate of soda and betaine collectively, you will get through the system of a carp bait 4 times faster than if it's left to its own devices. And you don't need to be me to understand what that means. It means if something's going through the fish's system 4 times faster, it means you've got 4 more chances of catching it because it's eating more food.
Yeah.
That's the first thing about betaine. The thing about lysine is, and again, I've mentioned this years and years ago. I mentioned this nearly 20 years ago now. And when I made this talk, 1 or 2 people, the jaws dropped open, then suddenly it becomes accepted as what out there. And I saw it on various baits that had already been sold, lysine rich, and I just smiled to myself. But basically, let me explain lysine. When carp have spawned, they need to produce a thing called trypsin, TRIPSIN. And trypsin, you and I produce in our pancreas. And what trypsin is, Dean, is it's something that breaks down your food. So you eat a croissant, and it goes into your stomach, and the way it gets broken down and gets shelved into shite that comes out of your back passage or something that's good and goes into your bloodstream is by a liquid that goes in there, and that's called trypsin. And when that liquid goes in and there's no in your stomach, that's why your stomach grumbles. But I'm getting off the point. And trypsin is converted predominantly in the pancreas by the addition of lysine, amino acid, free amino acid. Now, carp don't have a pancreas, so they cannot produce trypsin. The only way they can produce trypsin themselves is by a large intake of lysine. So they are looking for bait that is rich in lysine. Now then, but that's great, Mark. How do we get it into our bait? Now here's the problem you've got. Do I use powdered lysine? Do I use liquid lysine? Do I coat my bait with powdered lysine? Do I have my bait have powdered lysine in there? Do I glug with a lysine liquid? There are so many different applications of it, and what you've got to understand is what amino acids are. When people talk about free amino acids, which is what lysine is, it needs to be you can't denature it. So when you boil a bait that's got lysine powder in it, you're denaturing the actual lysine content. So I came up with an idea of using lysine that was part of liquid, so that I could have my boiled bait, I could dehydrate my bait, and then I could hydrate it with lysine, and thereby have a bait that had a great solubility to it, but it was leaking lysine, rather than the powder thing, where powder, by definition, without sounding like a drug addict, there's a difference between, how can I put it? The difference between swallowing a drug and injecting a drug straight into your bloodstream, or sniffing a drug, or something that goes straight into your brain. That will have a reaction quicker. Anything that goes into the gut takes longer for any animal to feel the benefit of it. It's better for the animal, but it takes longer for it to happen. So if I want lysine to become attractive to fish, I will always look to put it in a liquid form so that they're on it straight away, rather than a powdered form in an encapsulated boiler where they only feel the benefit of it once they've eaten it.
Yeah.
When you've got a liquid, you've got the benefit of stimulating both its senses, the olfactory one, which I've already explained, and the gust factor one. So that's basically a pocketbook analogy of betaine and lysine.
Brilliant. Fascinating. Right. This is the last question. It's one I've asked everybody. What is your secret or little guilty pleasure you like to have on the bank? Could be food, or maybe a TV show you like to watch that you don't want anyone to know about, or anything like that?
Is this answer before the watershed or after the watershed?
Well, I'll put a warning out before it starts for everyone.
Oh dear, my God. Well, I'll tell you what they used to be. It's all changed because, as you know, about 2.5 years ago, I had an heart attack and nearly died. So although I am actually now starting to fall back into bad ways, but I used to eat copious amounts of shortbread biscuits, and I used to eat copious amounts of bacon, all the stuff that you shouldn't eat. And what I've found, joking aside, is my little guilty pleasure, I suppose, is shortbread rounds.
Yeah.
And I mean, it just signifies how sad I've not turned into my dad, Dean. I've actually turned into my granddad. But I actually like to get my stall up. I like to get myself sorted with my bait and get my rods out. And I don't think there's anything better than sitting back with a warm brew of Yorkshire tea, and a packet of shortbread rounds. And that's how simplistic and how simple I've become these days, Dean.
Tell you what, you can't beat a good cup of tea and a good biscuit. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate that. You know, as always, I've seen a few of your talks at the shows. I've always found them really, really interesting, and I think this is going to go down well as well. Yeah. Well,
thanks for having me on, Dean. And listen, without having you crying in your beer, keep doing what you're doing, mate. I just like the ethos of it. There's a lot of nasty people around these days, and it's not just limited to fishing. It's just the society that we've created, and this disposable, instant gratification world that we live in. And fishing doesn't fall into that genre, particularly big carp fishing. So it can be. There can be parts of it that put people off. And as I alluded to earlier, I do get trolled a lot, but it used to bother me when I was younger. But as I've got older, it doesn't bother me, because I know that that groups like the Friendly Carpers and the stuff that Dave's Lyon doing with tackle mines and helping people, being nice, being kind, being helpful, it's not a weakness, it's a strength.
Yeah.
And that's why you keep doing the moderating and admin that you're doing, mate, because it's grassroots in carp fishing that hold the key, not the elite who go out and catch big fish and have access to the big fish waters. The way this carp fishing grows and the brotherhood that we've got, comes from normal people being kind to normal people. And you keep it up, mate. You're doing a cracking job.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate that. I do. Are you doing any shows next year? Are you down for any shows?
Well, yeah. Funny enough, we obviously shows are getting less and less. Like all these things, people don't like impromptu media. I love impromptu media. I love things like this.
Yeah.
I love live shows because I think you get, as I've mentioned on various podcasts and stuff this last 12 months, you get more of a mark of a man if he's not unscripted. You can get very clever videographers and editors who can make the most dull person look very interesting. What I like about shows and what I like about these type of things is that you can see from a person a bit more what he's like as a man rather than as a fisherman. Yeah. So to answer your question, I do like going to the shows. I think I will be at I know I'll be at the big one on the Shimano stand, and this year the northern one, which if you remember last year was at Adoc.
Yeah.
I think is now going to be moved, and it's going to be in Doncaster.
That's right.
And I believe it's going to be towards the end of November. So I'll certainly be with Nutrabaits. Yeah, I'll certainly be at I'll be with Nutrabaits at the northern one, and I'll certainly be at the big one. So that's probably going to be it. And of course, without sounding like a tart, anybody who wants to see a slideshow or anybody who needs a speaker for the evening, I'm always up to having a good laugh and meeting people. So that's probably what I shall be doing the next 12 months, Dean.
No, that's great. Well, thank you very much, Mark. I do really appreciate you giving up your time like this to do this. And, can't wait to see you back out on the bank again with another huge comment.
All right, Cocker. You take care, buddy.
All right, catch you later, mate. Thank you very much.
See you later, mate. Bye.